The Congo Basin exhaled its breath, a thick, humid vapor that clung to every leaf and vine in the dim pre-dawn light. In this emerald world, a young western lowland gorilla named Imani moved with a quiet confidence that belied her recent solitude. At 7 years old, she was on the cusp of adulthood, but a skirmish with a rival troop had scattered her family, leaving her to navigate the labyrinthine jungle alone. Her fur, the color of wet charcoal, blended seamlessly with the shadows, but her eyes, deep pools of amber and intelligence, missed nothing. It was a strange scent that drew her to the edge of the forest, a place where the familiar odors of damp earth and decaying hibiscus were tainted by something acrid and foreign. Human encroachment was a constant pressure, a slow-moving tide that nibbled away at her world. This scent, of smoke, rust, and refuse, was the smell of that tide. Curiosity, a powerful and often dangerous trait in a young gorilla, pulled her forward. Past a curtain of liana vines, she saw it, a clearing littered with the detritus of human life, piles of discarded plastic, rotting food, and, glinting in a stray shaft of sunlight, a large metal drum. It was an oil drum, left by poachers or perhaps loggers, its original purpose long forgotten. To Imani, it was an enigma. It smelled faintly of something sweet and fermented, mango peels discarded within. Driven by a hunger that gnawed at her belly more fiercely than her fear, she approached. She peered over the rusted rim. The scent was stronger from within. With the lithe power of her species, she placed her hands on the edge and leaned in, her powerful shoulders easily supporting her weight. The mango peels were just out of reach. Stretching, she shifted her weight, her knuckles brushing the smooth, cool interior. And then it happened. Her center of gravity tipped too far, the drum wobbled on the uneven ground, and with a heart-stopping lurch, she tumbled inside. The world became a cacophony of booming metal. The drum crashed onto its side, rolling a few feet before settling with a final deafening clang. Disoriented, Imani scrambled, her powerful limbs finding no purchase on the slick curved walls. The opening, once a wide circle of jungle green, was now a narrow sliver of light against the muddy ground. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. She pushed, battered, and roared, but her strength, so formidable in the open forest, was useless here. The drum was her prison, a resonant chamber that amplified her cries of fury and fear into a terrifying din, then absorbed them into its unyielding steel heart. Day 1. The Iron Cage. The first day was a blur of frantic energy. Imani hurled herself against the walls, her knuckles growing raw, her muscles screaming in protest. The sun climbed high, turning the drum into a convection oven. The air grew thick and suffocating, tasting of rust and her own panicked breath. Thirst, a familiar companion in the dry season, began its insidious work. But this was different. Trapped, with no access to the succulent plants or morning dew that sustained her, the thirst was a tightening vice. By nightfall, exhaustion claimed her. She slumped to the bottom of the drum, her roars dwindling to whimpering groans that were lost to the jungle's nocturnal chorus. Day 2. The Silence of Despair. Hope began to curdle into despair. The frantic energy of the previous day gave way to a lethargic misery. Her body ached, a deep, bruising pain from her futile assault on the walls. Her throat was sandpaper. She could hear the world outside, the chatter of monkeys, the distant call of a hornbill, the rustle of unseen creatures, a symphony of the life she was no longer part of. It was a form of torture more profound than the physical confinement. She was a ghost, listening to a world that had already moved on without her. At one point, she heard the low rumble of her troop, their signature chest beats echoing from a distant ridge. She called out, a weak, rasping cry, but it was swallowed by her metal tomb. They were too far. They wouldn't find her. For the first time, Imani felt the chilling touch of mortality, the understanding that this drum could be her grave. Day 3. The Spark of Genius. By the third day, severe dehydration had set in, her tongue was thick and swollen, her vision swam, and a dull, pounding headache pulsed behind her intelligent eyes. She lay motionless, conserving what little energy remained. The jungle baked around her, but as afternoon bled into evening, the sky darkened with the promise of a storm. The air grew heavy, and the temperature inside the drum dropped slightly. This is where the story of Imani ceases to be one of tragedy and becomes one of astonishing ingenuity. As the cooler air met the still warm metal, condensation began to form on the interior surface of the drum. Tiny droplets, like pinpricks of diamond, materialized on the curved ceiling above her. At first, she didn't understand, but her desperate thirst was a powerful motivator. Instinctively, she reached up and licked the cool metal. The moisture was minuscule, barely enough to wet her tongue, but it was water. A flicker of the old Imani, the curious and clever problem solver, ignited within her. She began to systematically lick every reachable surface, her large, soft tongue swiping across the steel. It was painstaking work for a meager reward, but it was life. Then the storm broke. It wasn't a deluge, but a brief, intense downpour common to the region. Rain hammered on the drum, creating a deafening roar. A small amount of water began to trickle in where the drum's opening was pressed against the uneven ground, forming a tiny, muddy puddle. For another animal, this might have been the only salvation. But Imani did something more. Lying nearby inside the drum, mixed with the mango peels and other debris, was a large, waxy leaf that had fallen in before her. It was crumpled and dirty. During her frantic struggles, she had ignored it. Now, in a moment of cognitive brilliance that would later stun the scientific community, Imani saw not a piece of trash, but a tool. With painstaking effort, her movements slow and deliberate from weakness, she picked up the leaf. She carefully maneuvered it towards the small trickle of water seeping under the rim. She didn't try to drink directly from the muddy patch. Instead, she used the leaf as a sponge. She pressed it into the wet earth, letting the broad surface absorb the precious rainwater. Then, she lifted the sodden leaf to her mouth and squeezed, pressing it with her lips and tongue, wringing out the clean water it had soaked up, bypassing the mud and grit. She repeated the process again and again. It was a display of abstract reasoning, understanding the absorbent properties of the leaf and its utility as an intermediary device. It was a sequence of actions that required foresight, memory, and a grasp of cause and effect far beyond simple instinct. While the jungle raged outside, Imani, inside her dark prison, was orchestrating her own survival with the quiet focus of a master craftsman. Day 4, the rescue. Dr. Eris Thorne had seen a lot in his 40 years as a conservation biologist. He was a man whose optimism had been weathered down by decades of fighting a losing battle against poaching, habitat loss, and human indifference. He and his young Congolese research assistant, Kenji, were tracking the very troop Imani had been separated from. "Their movements are erratic," Eris said, tapping a GPS tracker on his tablet. "It's like they're searching for something, or someone." The matriarch's youngest daughter, Imani, hasn't been sighted with them for 5 days, Kenji noted, his brow furrowed with concern. The villagers near the logging route mentioned hearing strange noises a few days ago, like someone beating on metal. A knot of unease tightened in Eris's stomach. "Let's check the clearing by the old route." When they arrived, the first thing they saw was the drum. Flies buzzed over the opening, and a faint, foul odor hung in the air. Eris's heart sank. He'd seen this before, animals trapped in human refuse, a sad and ugly end. He approached cautiously, expecting to find a dead monkey or a wild pig. Kenji circled the drum. "Doctor, look!" He pointed to a set of massive gorilla prints in the mud leading to the drum, but none leading away. Eris felt a jolt of adrenaline. He peered toward the sliver of an opening. "Hello?" he called out softly, feeling foolish for it. A weak groan answered from within. "My God!" Eris breathed. Kenji, Get the pry bars and the tranquilizer kit. Be ready. She'll be terrified and aggressive." The rescue was a tense and delicate operation. They couldn't simply roll the drum, as it would crush the animal inside. Using long pry bars, they carefully, painstakingly leveraged the heavy container upwards, inch by agonizing inch, blocking it with logs as they went. The groans from inside grew louder, a mixture of fear and perhaps a sliver of hope. Finally, the opening was wide enough. Aris, rifle loaded with a mild sedative dart, peered inside. The sight hit him with the force of a physical blow. A young female gorilla lay curled on the bottom, her fur matted with filth and sweat. She was emaciated, her powerful frame skeletal, but her eyes were open, and they were fixed on him. They held no aggression, only a profound, soul-deep weariness. She was too weak to fight. He lowered the rifle. "We don't need it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's get her out." They managed to coax her, and with the last of her strength, she crawled out of the drum and collapsed onto the soft earth, blinking in the sudden, brilliant light. She was alive. It felt like a miracle. The revelation. They transported her to the Virunga Conservation Center. As she slowly recovered her strength, nourished by electrolyte solutions and soft fruits, Eris and Kenji returned to the clearing, driven by a nagging question. 4 days with no water in this heat, Eris mused, shaking his head. It doesn't add up. An adult gorilla needs liters a day. She should have been dead from organ failure. She must have gotten lucky with that rainstorm. Kenji, however, was more meticulous. He crouched by the drum, which now lay on its side, the interior exposed. "Doctor, come see this." Eris walked over. Kenji was pointing inside the drum. "The puddle of rainwater is here," he said, indicating the muddy patch near the rim. "But look at the rest of the interior." Eris squinted. The inner surface of the drum was covered in faint but distinct streaks. They were swipe marks, patterns left by something being systematically wiped across the metal. They radiated outwards from the top, where condensation would have been heaviest. "She was licking the condensation," Eris whispered, a sense of awe dawning on him. "Incredible." "That's not all," Kenji said, his voice trembling with excitement. He carefully reached into the drum and retrieved the waxy, crumpled leaf. He held it up. It was still damp. This was lying right next to the muddy spot. "See how it's folded? And look at the edges. They're frayed, as if from being squeezed." Eris took the leaf, his mind racing, putting the pieces together. The swipe marks, the puddle, the leaf. It wasn't just luck. It wasn't just base instinct. It was a multi-step process. A deliberate, intelligent solution to a complex problem. She had harvested the condensation, and when a better opportunity arose with the rain, she had fashioned a tool to collect it cleanly. He looked from the leaf in his hand to the distant green canopy of the forest. The story of Imani's survival was no longer just a lucky break, it was a testament. In that moment, the weariness of Aris's 40-year career lifted, replaced by a profound and humbling respect. These creatures they fought to save were not just victims or data points. They were thinkers. They were problem solvers. They possessed a depth of consciousness he had only ever theorized about. The story of Imani spread like wildfire through the conservation world. It shocked everyone, challenging long-held assumptions about animal intelligence. She wasn't just a gorilla who got stuck in a drum. She was an individual who, when faced with certain death, refused to surrender. She used not just her strength, but her mind. Weeks later, a healthy and fully recovered Imani was reintroduced to her family, who had remained in the area, never straying too far. Aris and Kenji watched from a distance as she was greeted with grunts and gentle embraces. As she disappeared back into the emerald heart of the Congo, Aris thought about the metal drum, now removed and stored at the research center like a museum piece. It was a symbol of human carelessness, but Imani had transformed it. It was now a monument to the unyielding will to survive, and a stunning, humbling reminder of the brilliant, resilient minds that flicker behind the eyes of our closest animal relatives.